Welcome to another program. My, do we have a program? We're going to talk about Israel to a degree. We're going to talk about people with mental health, people who don't know what to do. We all got some kind of mental illness, believe it or not, folks, because we're human, and with all of the crises we go through on a daily basis, and also the economic plight of people of color and all people, but particularly people of color. You know, the banks won't give us loans. You have to go through an underwriter, a person that you'll never meet. The manager of the bank can't give you the loan no more. It's just a lot of unnecessary pressure. But we got our friend, Dr. Sabrina Jackson, who want to talk to us a little bit. But guess what? My wife met her with Dr. Plummer, Pauline Plummer of Covenant Daughters, met her in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, through the whole state of Israel. But she saw Dr. Jackson on a particular program in Israel, came back to the room because it was just for women. I couldn't go. I stayed in the room, Dr. Jackson. But my wife came to the room. Charles, you got to meet Dr. Sabrina Jackson. I said, okay, and that, oh, Charles, I'm serious. I said, I believe you. Ladies and gentlemen, here she is, none other than Dr. Sabrina Jackson. And welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wouldn't have it no other way. First of all, why did my wife come back to my room in Jerusalem, Israel, and tell me that she was so motivated about you?
Well, I am a professional speaker, so I do speak for a living. So I was over there with my sister, Pauline, Dr. Pauline Plummer, and of course, Bishop Plummer. And I did a session for the women called Essential Colors. Essential Colors is a personality assessment model designed to help you understand how you're wired, but then more importantly, how to deal with people who are wired differently. But I'm not your usual speaker. I'm not just going to talk and you listen to me. I get people up and moving because I believe in order to get something out of something, you have to be willing to put something in. And so I give the people an opportunity to put something in. So we had a great time. It was high energy. We laughed. And I think the most profound part was that we were all exhausted from the day. You know, we had been out touring and walking up a hill and down a hill and cross terrain and up steps and down steps. But we set that room ablaze. And so I feel very honored to have met your wife, much less call her my new mama.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
I know she loves you instantaneously.
Instantaneously.
And look, you here in Atlanta with us now.
Yes.
And you're based out of Detroit.
I am. I live in Detroit.
And you're going to be at our convention.
I will be there to set that room ablaze. So if you can get to Washington, you better come on.
I love it. But you were running some numbers down on mental illness.
Yes.
I was so elated. I wish our producer, Mr. Clear, had the camera on, but he got it on now. If you could go back over that about mental illness.
Well, it's important to know that the World Health Organization did a study. And in that study, they said that since the pandemic, there has been a tsunami of new diagnoses of depression and anxiety. There has been 53 million new diagnoses of depression and 76 million new diagnoses of anxiety. But let me say that I believe that's a number, but I don't believe that people of color are included in that number. I also don't believe that nurses, doctors, police officers, the first responders are included in that number, because what I understand about people who are in the helping profession, they very rarely go and get help. And so a lot of people who have been the ones keeping us through did not get help themselves. And then as people of color, you know, we have the stigma.
That's right.
When it comes to the word
Absolutely.
mental health, we think
Absolutely.
that means we're crazy.
Absolutely.
And so what's crazy is when you have a problem and you don't go get help. And so I always say that mental illness, and I want people to really grab hold of this, is like an umbrella. So the umbrella of a mental health, and up under that umbrella is a continuum from mental wellness all the way to mental illness. And so on any given day, something can happen
Sure.
that can bring you closer to mental wellness or closer to mental illness. And so you have to know how stress shows up for you, what things that you think, that you act, and that you feel, so that you can control it and it doesn't control you. So I think that all of us, no matter what we're going through or no matter who we are, can have someone that we talk to.
Let me ask you this, because I know for a fact, because we deal with the homelessness throughout this country and throughout the world, but basically starting in Atlanta and then going from there, 40% of the homelessness are African American, black people. Many times it's because of financial
Yes.
and the embeddedness of drugs and alcohol. How do you focus upon that?
Well, the first thing is that we have to be able to give people something that they've never had access to. And so that is the opportunity to have the freedom and the liberty to work a job, to have the resources that they need to keep the job. But I think that a lot of times people don't have that because we have been exit out of the opportunities. You were talking about economically going to get a loan. You can't get a loan if you look like us. You can't get a loan. And
My
even,
Lord, my
let me
Lord.
give you this
Sure,
example. I
sure.
have a very good friend back in Detroit who is a millionaire. She has an environmental company. And so when the pandemic happened and she took her staff and they were working from home, she had a Caucasian assistant. And the assistant went to the bank and got a signature loan for $5,000 so she could set up her computer and stuff, get new computer and stuff for her home. And so my girlfriend, who is her boss, who owns the place, asked her, well, how did you get a signature loan? She said, I just went to the bank and they told me to sign this
My
paper
Lord.
and they gave me a check.
My
So
Lord.
she said, oh, you can do the same thing. So she went to the bank and the bank told her she had to use her home as collateral.
Wow.
And she was her boss.
Wow. So racism is systemic,
Yes.
and we have to deal with it.
Yes.
We have fair-minded thinking people of all ethnicity background we know. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for some fair-minded thinking Caucasian and other races of people. America has never been here from slavery. What's your opinion when we hear all the time without signifying any particular individual, because it's all over? What do you think we need to do in order to bring about the historicity, even with some black folks, about where we come from? My wife retired as a history teacher, Southern history. Had to call it Southern history, couldn't call it African American history.
Right.
Because of the system. But Southern history, even black students didn't want to hear or participate about where we come from.
Well, one of the things that's so sad, but it's true, that, and I know you know this, is the Willie Lynch letter. What the Willie Lynch letter said is that if you encompass their mind, you'll never have to put chains on them.
That's right.
So if we pit them against each other, which they did a very good job of,
They
we
did.
still have the
They did.
light skin versus
That's
the
right.
black, dark
That's right.
skin, all that kind of stuff going on.
That's right.
And then we have the man versus the woman.
That's right.
And so, and all of these things were put on us, and we continue to perpetuate it.
Right.
So a lot of times when it's an opportunity to learn something or to have a party, we gravitate to the party.
Right.
If we have an opportunity to gain knowledge or gain a blunt, we go for the blunt. So we have to, as the people who have some forward thinking.
Blunt meaning marijuana.
Yeah, marijuana, cannabis. I'm just saying.
I heard that before. Growing up, and with my background in Michigan too, I'm a Alabama boy, but I'm also a Michigan boy. I love Detroit.
Oh, yes.
I had so many good experiences. As a teenager, I'd go to Detroit all the time. That's one of the reasons I love you, because Detroit was the first city with the first middle-class Negro
Yes.
at that time
Yes.
because of the automotive
Yes, because
industry.
of the automotive
Right.
industry. And so a lot of times there were things about money that we haven't been taught.
Right.
And so it's one thing to give people money, but if you don't give them the resources of what to do when you have the money, they'll keep doing the same thing.
Right.
So you'll have people that when they get the money, they'll go and get a new car, they'll go and get really nice clothes, they'll go and get really nice jewelry.
Big TV.
Big TV, the biggest TV, big as the wall. They'll do all of those things, but not do things to make sure that
Right.
you have generational wealth.
Right.
So even when you say that to a person, I've heard people say, "Well, I'm not leaving my kids nothing. I had to do it, so they have to do it."
Mm-hmm.
But other cultures don't think that way. They rear their children to show them this is what you're going to do and this is the way you're going to get it and we're going to help you do it. And so a lot of times we don't do that. Or even if we do, we want the young person to do what we want them to do and not really help them to do what's their passion or their vision to do. And so like I have a good friend, he has a business and he's mad because his children don't want to do what he started a business doing. However, it's so important that they need to know that there are things that that person can do and they're successful at it. So like he has a restaurant. He has a son that's an attorney, and he has a daughter that's an engineer. They ain't thinking about no restaurant. So then you have to find other people that you can
Right.
build and let do what you
Right.
wanted to do. So sometimes our thinking is we major in the minors.
Right.
We major in something that's a small thing
Right.
instead of really looking at the big picture.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, my brother and I also in the funeral home business that my father left us in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And I was listening to someone in L.A. We was in L.A., my wife and I, under the trumpet award, but one of the speakers was talking about the secession of the funeral home business, where black families can't find their children. And I can relate to this, you know, but we got to find somebody
You
outside.
gotta find somebody outside
You hit it
our
on
family.
the head, Dr. Jackson.
Yes, because
Somebody outside our family. Go ahead.
because at the end of the day, we choose our circle.
Okay.
So just like you said that your wife and I, when we met, we immediately yoked up. She ain't ever getting rid of me. She ain't never getting rid of me.
That's right.
And so and we're not related by blood.
That's right.
But she my mama.
That's right.
It's
that's
nothing
right.
that she can't ask me for that
My
I'm not
Lord.
gonna do for her.
Isn't that something?
And so we have to understand that we have to open ourselves up because God, I always say this, God blesses us, but he uses people to do it.
Woo! Say that
He-
again.
God blesses us, but he uses people to do it. So we need each other. We need to understand that you may not think like I think or believe like I believe, but that don't mean that we can't yoke up this thing together and make a difference.
My Lord. Dr. Jackson, you are blessed. Since I mentioned Detroit, I want to mention our local president, Reverend Aaron McCarthy, who passed about 10, 12 days ago, who was so loyal to the national office, my leadership, my chief of staff, Mr. Liggins. DeMark Liggins was very close to him, and he supported this office at the national SCLC, and he passed. And he told DeMark, our chief of staff, DeMark Liggins, he said, I should have surgery. I don't know what that was all about. He said, but I'm going to put the surgery off until I come to our convention.
Wow.
And for whatever reason, he didn't make the convention, and God called him home in his transition. So I just wanted to say that because you're from Detroit,
Yes.
and how we all love Detroit, because it was the beginning of business and economic development for black folks out of Detroit. And Reverend Aaron McCarthy was our local president. And God bless his family, God bless his spirit, and we know he made his transition to heaven. Before we close, in calling you a psychologist or psychiatrist, would I be correct?
Psychologist.
Psychologist.
Because
Tell me
there's a
about
difference
that.
between a psychologist and a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor. They're an MD. And so they're an MD that helps you with the brain. So they prescribe medicines for if you're depressed or if you have a mental illness or if you're seeing things or you're hearing voices and you need medication. Psychiatrists do that. Psychologists do testing, they do therapy, counseling, things of that nature. So it's important. So like if a person says that they need an IQ test, psychologists do those type of testing.
Okay.
And that's different from what a psychiatrist does. So I am a clinical therapist. I don't really do therapy anymore because I travel so much speaking and training.
You have your own TV show, don't you?
Well, I
Tell
don't
us
have
about
a
that
TV
before we
show.
leave.
It's so funny.
Yeah, tell us about your TV show.
I do a segment on Fox 2 in Detroit, and you can watch it any place if you go to Fox 2 Detroit. Every Monday at 10:30 a.m., I have a segment called Mental Health Mondays with Dr. Sabrina. So I give tips, tools, and strategies on how to keep your mental together. So this past Monday, I talked about road rage.
Okay.
Because sometimes,
wow.
oh my goodness.
Wow.
And so usually when I talk about something, I have an acronym. And so my acronym for the road rage piece was peace, because we need to keep peace.
Yes.
Because too often. So first we need to pardon. Sometimes we need to give people some, grace. Oh, that E is that you need to empathize. Take a minute and say that there's been times that I've been on the road that I was rushing to get to some place. Somebody else may be in that same position as well. So empathize. Don't just look it through your viewpoint. Look at it from another person's point of view. The A is that you need to avoid eye contact. Because when somebody rides up on the side of you, and you go and grim at them, ooh.
Come on, Dr.
Because
Jackson.
too often people say, I'm just matching energy. No. Matching negative energy is what gets people killed.
Woo, Dr. Jackson.
So don't be matching that energy. And then the C, you need to calm down. Stop being so angry. I always say this. If you become unoffendable, that right there is a word. Become unoffendable. You can't even get me off my square. You don't have that type of power.
Woo.
And then the last E is that you need to embrace and obey the driving laws. Some of us need to go back and revisit what the law says. Because we don't even know it. We don't even know it. Like at a four-way stop, people don't know.
Yes.
If it's my turn,
yes,
then I go. But if it's you 3 cars behind me, you can't go when I go. That's not the law. Four-way stop. I go, then they go, then they,
Yes.
You supposed learn
basic stuff.
Basic stuff. And so I believe that when we get our license and after you've had it so long, you need to take a refresher.
Ooh, Dr. Jackson. Ladies and gentlemen, you hear that? My wife and I are in the car 90% of the time together. And she calms me down. I said, look at that, baby. He cut in front. Charles, cool it.
Cool it.
I said, okay, baby. And then after a minute or so, I'm okay.
But think about it.
Yes.
If something jumps off, don't nobody know that person in that car, but they know you. And the news story is going to lead.
Oh.
Dr. Steele, president of the SCLC.
That's right.
Is road raging. I tell people this all the time.
Wow.
When they're around me and they start doing that matching energy, I say, don't nobody know y'all. And if something jump
story
off,
gonna be on you.
The story gonna be Dr. Sabrina was in a parking structure. And
the psychologist.
Yes, the people expert, because that's my tag. I'm a people expert. I help people with people.
Wow.
Even if that person is themselves. Because I say all the time, we think it's somebody else that needs help.
Yeah.
And it's really us standing in the need.
You know what? I could talk to you for days.
Forever.
But let me show you where you hit my heart just then. I was with a group of people 3 weeks ago. This young man come out on a scooter. And these are entrepreneurs. Got restaurant. Very successful people. Forgot to lock the door. And this guy on the scooter, we weren't paying attention, but the young man's fiance was watching while we over here getting all excited about his restaurant. Mm-hmm. She said, baby, the man on the scooter, he done got in my car and forgot to lock the door. And the point being, everybody started running toward the guy who had taken not a purse, but he got the telephone. And then for some reason, someone said, throw the phone down. But this is my point. And the young man threw the phone down and said, I'm sorry, but this is my point. He said, Steele, what if something really serious would have happened to that? You would have become the story. Charles Steele was with this group that jumped on this young man or whatever violently would have taken place. But somebody, and I wasn't about to chase nobody, but somebody had enough courage to go after the young man and say, drop the phone. And he dropped it, Dr. Jackson, and he turned around and said, I'm sorry. And he got on his scooter.
And keep going.
That's what you were saying. We got to have the understanding of these type of situations before they occur.
Before they occur. Stop that matching energy. That's the new.
I like that.
That's the
Matching
new term.
energy. Yes.
They say, "Oh, I'm matching energy. If you negative, then I'm going to be negative." No, no, no.
Yes.
No, because people can't. Like my son and I, we stopped using the term peer pressure because I don't believe in peer pressure. I believe that people can't pressure you to do something that's not in you.
Yes.
So my son at 12 told me, "Ma, I don't believe in peer pressure." I says, "Why?" He says, "Because if I'm in a room with 100 people and everybody's using drugs, I'm not going to use
That's
drugs
right.
because drugs is not in me."
That's
so
right.
now we say peer pricking because people can only prick what's inside of you.
Woo!
So if you get to cussing, I'm not a cusser, so
Yes.
I'm not going to cuss.
Right.
But if you get to cussing and I start cussing, you just prick the cussing that was in me.
You're at the same level. Thank you so much. In closing, what can you say to our audience? And we have a lot of people watching all over the world. What can you say about the ethnicity and background of people coming together? What can you say and leave us with?
Ooh, I got an acronym for you. I want you to understand that anytime we're talking about the people that's around us and the people that God blesses us to impact, because we never know who's watching us. And so that makes all of us leaders because we lead from the space that we occupy. So the C in care is that you have to be coachable, because how do you get better if can't nobody tell you nothing?
Wow.
And so too often we get stuck in our limited thinking and we can't grow beyond it. And so when we're talking about our groups and even in our own groups, we have to be open to feedback so we can learn something that we've never learned and we didn't know, so we can have something we've never had. Then the A is that you have to have an attitude of gratitude, because you have way more to be thankful for than you have to complain about. And what I've learned is if you're complaining, you can't be thankful. And if you're thankful, you can't complain. So even when there are issues, we still have something to be grateful for. The fact that we are sitting in the office of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, that is something to be thankful for. We can't be complaining and saying, well, what they doing now? Be thankful for all the stuff they have done. Then the R is that you have to be righteously responsible. You have to own your stuff. If you don't know something, go learn something. If you know something, then teach something. Be responsible for what is in your hands.
My Lord.
And then the E, I used to say embrace excellence, but what I've learned is if I embrace it, I can let it go. So now I say embody excellence. And if I embody it, when I show up, my best shows up.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. And the best showed up today. And that's you, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know you have enjoyed this, because we could talk forever, because in the leadership role of Dr. Jackson, it can solve the problems of the world. You just don't know how you would touch me and many others who are watching. Dr. Sabrina Jackson from Detroit, Michigan,
Yes.
whom my wife met in Jerusalem, in Israel.
That was great.
And they are friends for life.
For life.
For life.
For life.
And thank you again, Dr.
Thank
Jackson.
you. People can find me on my website.
Yeah, please tell us.
SabrinaJackson.com or on Instagram at thepeopleexpert_. I have all kind of tips, tools, strategies, and I be trying to help the people. So come on.
And you're doing a great job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's why you must tune in every week to SCLC Today, because love is what love does, and we love you. God bless you.
Dr. and Mrs. Charles Steele, along with Dr. and Mrs. Bernard Lafayette, will be your gracious hosts at this, the 64th Annual Convention of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in Washington, D.C., this August 25th and 26th. Our 64th Annual Convention also coincides with the 60th Commemorative March on Washington. Please join us for these two extraordinary events. Make your plans now by visiting either of our websites, sclcconvention.com or nationalsclc.org. The movement continues. We hope to see you there.